Sera did not cry. That was the thing people remembered later, when they talked about it in low voices over dinner tables and across market stalls. Not the words Alpha Caius spoke, not the name of the woman whose hand he reached for the moment Sera's was released. What they remembered, what unsettled them, quietly, for a long time after, was that Sera did not cry. She stood in the center of the full moon ceremony, under open sky, with every ranked wolf in the kingdom watching, and she received the rejection the way stone receives rain. She touched the silver ring on her finger, once. Then her hand was still. Caius had not lowered his voice. That was important to him, it seemed, that everyone hear. He said she was not fit for the title. He said the bloodline required strength she did not possess. He said the word unworthy with the ease of a man who had practiced it, and then he stepped back and held his hand out to someone else, and that someone else stepped forward, wearing a dress the color of winter roses, and the crowd exhaled like one single creature finally comfortable again. Sera looked at the ring on her finger. Her mother had worn it first. It was plain silver, slightly dented on one side from a night Sera did not speak about, a night that left her with nothing except the ring and the name of one person to find if she ever ran out of every other choice. She put her hands at her sides. She walked. Not away, out. There is a difference. Away means something is chasing you. Out means you decided. She walked through the gathered crowd, and no one moved to stop her, because no one knew the right words for what they were watching. She went through the great iron gates of the territory, and she did not look back, and the gates did not close dramatically behind her, because gates are not interested in drama. They simply stood open, the way they always did, indifferent. The road out was dark. The full moon gave her enough light to see the path, and she walked it for 3 hours before she stopped, sat on a flat rock beside a dry stream, and pressed her palms against her knees. Her chest hurt. That was honest. Her chest hurt the way a place hurts when something that lived there for a long time has finally been removed, and the space it leaves behind is raw and enormous, and does not know yet what it is supposed to become. She sat with that for a while. Then she stood up and kept walking. She had a name. Her mother had given it to her, wrapped in the same breath as the ring, spoken quietly in a room that smelled of dried herbs, and something sweeter underneath, the night everything changed. Find the elder at the edge of the fen forest. Tell her your mother sent you. She will know what to do. Sera had carried that sentence for 4 years without using it. She had told herself she would never need to. She had believed, for a long time, that things would be different. She found the fen forest on the 4th day of walking. She found the elder on the morning of the 5th. The woman was old in the way that certain things are old. Not fragile, not tired, but worn down to only what is essential. She was sitting outside a small stone house, pulling dead roots from a bucket, and she looked up when Sera came through the tree line and said, without any greeting at first, "You have her eyes." "She said you would know what to do," Sera said. The elder looked at her for a long moment. Then she nodded once and went back to her roots. "You can sleep inside. Training starts at dawn." Sera did not ask what training. She went inside and slept for 14 hours. It was not what stories make it look like. There was no single morning where Sera woke up strong. There was no dramatic transformation, no voice from the sky telling her she was chosen. There were mornings where she could not get off the floor. There were sessions where whatever the elder was pulling out of her came in waves of pain so sharp and so specific that she pressed her face into the cold dirt and breathed through it, because there was nothing else available to do. "Again," the elder said, on those mornings. Sera went again. She learned what she was in pieces, the way you learn a language in a country where no one else speaks your first one. A word here, a word there. The understanding arriving, not all at once but slowly, reshaping everything it touched. Her bloodline was not common. It was not even rare in the way that rare things are still seen occasionally, still named, still pictured in books. It was the kind of rare that had passed out of the known world 3 generations ago, and left behind only old words, in a language most wolves no longer read. The elder called it by its name one evening, and Sera repeated it back, and the fire between them shifted, just slightly, the way a flame shifts when something real passes close to it. "You did not know," the elder said. No. He did not know either. Sera looked at the fire. Would it have changed anything? The elder considered this honestly. For him? No. For you? You would have had less time to become who you are without his interference. Sera did not answer. She turned the ring on her finger, once, and let that be enough. 6 months passed. In the kingdom, things were reported to be going well. A letter reached the fen forest through a trader who owed the elder a favor, tucked inside a package of dried grain, and it contained the news that Alpha Caius and his chosen Luna had held a second ceremony, and it had been beautiful, and the people had celebrated, and the future of the bloodline felt certain and strong. Sera read the letter once. 3 days later she ran until her lungs gave out, walked home through the dark forest with her hands loose at her sides, washed her face in the cold basin by the door, and went to bed. The elder did not comment. She understood that grief is not always loud, and that sometimes the body needs to process what the mind has already decided to leave behind. The training continued. The morning that something fundamentally changed, Sera did not recognize it as that kind of morning. She woke before dawn the way she always did, went to the clearing the way she always did, and began the exercise the elder had assigned, a focusing technique, a way of pulling the deepest part of her ability forward and holding it steady, controlled. She pulled. The trees at the edge of the clearing went quiet. All of them, at the same moment, as if something had asked them to listen. And then, slowly, they leaned toward her, every single one. An entire tree line inclining, the way tall things incline toward the thing that commands them, slowly and without question. Sera stood in the center of it and felt the ground beneath her feet hum. The elder, standing at the edge of the clearing, said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "There it is." The threat came in the deep of winter, from the northern border, in a form the kingdom had not faced before. It moved through the outer settlements first, and the reports that reached the capital were strange and inconsistent, which was its own kind of warning. Things that are simple do not produce strange and inconsistent reports. Caius sent his generals north. The generals sent word back that they needed more. He sent more. The word that returned was worse. His Luna stood beside him in the war room, and her presence was kind, and her counsel was loyal, and it was not enough. Because loyalty and kindness are not the same as the specific kind of strength the situation required, and the situation was becoming clear to everyone in that room, even if no one said it plainly. The word went out to the outer territories. Anyone with knowledge, with ability, with something useful, the capital needed it. The word reached the fen forest. Sera was sitting at the small wooden table with a cup of tea cooling in her hands. The elder read the message aloud. When she finished, she set it on the table and looked at Sera and did not say anything, because she had learned, in 8 months of teaching this woman, that the silence before Sera spoke was worth more than anything said into it. Sera finished her tea. She set the cup down. She said, "I will need a horse." She rode in alone. The guards at the outer gate of the capital saw her from a distance and assumed she was a messenger, which was reasonable, because she was riding without escort, and her clothing was plain, and there was nothing about her arrival that announced itself. They opened the gate and she rode through, and the announcement she did not make preceded her anyway, moving from person to person through the crowd that had gathered in the main roads, moving the way recognition moves, starting as a question, becoming a certainty. She had not changed her face. She had not changed her name. What had changed was the thing underneath both of those, the quality that comes from 8 months of becoming what you were supposed to be, and it is not a thing you can name precisely, but it is visible, the way the sun is visible, the way the ground is visible. People stepped back without deciding to. She rode to the front of the capital's gathering grounds, where Caius stood with his generals and his ranked wolves, and the unresolved problem that had brought her here, and she stopped her horse and looked at it, the threat, not him, and assessed. Caius looked at her. She did not look at him first. That was not a statement. It was simply accurate prioritization. The threat was the thing that required attention. He was not, in this moment, the most important thing in the space. She dismounted. What happened next is difficult to describe in the precise language of events, because the precise language of events does not quite cover it. She moved to the front. She did what the elder had spent 8 months preparing her to do, The ability that had bent the tree line toward her in a dawn clearing expressed itself fully, without performance, without announcement, the way deep water expresses itself, not by making noise, but by being undeniable. The threat ceased. The clearing was very quiet. The ranked wolves around her lowered themselves, not because they had decided to, not because ceremony required it, but because the body knows what the mind sometimes argues with, and their bodies were not arguing. Caius stood in the stillness of what had just happened, and understood, in the part of him that is honest despite everything, that the woman standing in his square was not the woman he had dismissed on a full moon night in front of his entire kingdom. Or rather, she was exactly that woman. She had been that woman then. He simply had not known what he was looking at. He found her that evening, near the eastern wall, looking out at the city. He said her name. She turned around, which was more than he deserved, and she listened to what he said. He said a great deal. He said he had been wrong. He said he had been proud, in the kind of way that destroys things. He said he had let an assumption about her family's rank become a verdict on her entire self, and that he understood now how catastrophically that verdict had failed, and that if he could, and he knew he could not, he would go back to that ceremony and choose differently. He was sincere. She could tell he was sincere. Sincerity, she had learned, is its own kind of thing, separate from accountability, separate from consequence, sometimes mistaken for them. She waited until he had finished. Then she said, quietly and without unkindness, "I am glad you do not have that choice. I would not be who I am if you had made a different one." He had no answer for that. There was no answer. It was the truest sentence available, and it closed the particular door he had been trying to open, gently, but completely, the way a true thing closes doors, not with force, but with finality. She went back to looking at the city. The elder council met, 3 days later, not to debate. What Sera was had been witnessed by enough people that debate was a performance no one had energy for. What they needed was the formal word, the old word, the designation that the kingdom's records had not used in 3 generations because there had been no one to give it to. They gave it to her, in a small room with no audience. She had asked for that. She wore her mother's ring. The eldest of the council spoke the title, and Sera received it the same way she had received everything, with her hands still, and her face clear, and the silver ring slightly warm on her finger, as if it too understood what this moment was, and had been waiting for it. That night, the full moon came again. It comes every month, of course. It does not care about anniversaries or what happened beneath its light the last time it was full. But Sera stood outside in the small courtyard behind the guest quarters the council had given her, and she looked up at it, and she let it be what it was. She did not think about Caius. She thought about her mother, about the room that smelled of dried herbs, and the name pressed into her hand with the ring. About 4 years of carrying a name and a direction, and not knowing why yet. About the night she walked out of the iron gates carrying nothing, believing she had nothing, and how wrong that belief had been. Not cruelly wrong, but mercifully wrong, in the way that is only understood looking back. She had been carrying everything. She just had not known it yet. The moon held still above her. The city breathed below. She pressed her thumb against the slight dent in the ring's silver, and she stood in the quiet and felt, for the first time in a very long time, that the space inside her chest was no longer raw. It had become something else. It did not have a name yet. That was fine. She was patient. She had learned how to be.